Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Gazette Mail Candidate Forum with candidates for Circuit Judge of Kanawha County, the Kanawha County Circuit Judge. This is a Gazette Mail Forum with all three candidates in the contest for the November 6th election. My name is Kelly Merritt. I am editor of the Daily Mail opinion page.
And I'm Rick Steelhammer, reporter for the Charleston Gazette Mail. Ben Field, city editor for the Charleston Gazette Mail.
I'm Dawn Miller, Gazette opinion page editor.
I'm photographer Chris Stores.
Now, if each of the candidates will take about 2 minutes to introduce themselves, explain why they're running, and then we will start with questions. Mr. Greer.
Well, thank you. I'm Dan Greer. Most of you probably know a little bit about me, my background. I've lived in Kanawha County all my life. I graduated from South Charleston High School, graduated from West Virginia University College of Law in '92, came back to practice, and I've been practicing here ever since. 20 years in private practice with various firms, the largest period of time as a partner in the firm Kessler Bramble at the time. Started out my practice largely doing civil defense work. By the end of the practice, it was about 50-50 plaintiffs work and personal and defense work, largely personal injury litigation and some various odd stuff that would come into the firm. I spent 2 years at the Attorney General's office as chief counsel, and then 4 years with the House of Delegates as the chief of staff until being appointed to replace Judge Stuckey in July. Why I'm running, my answer is probably a little different after a couple of months on the bench. I've always thought that it would be a position that would be well suited for my personality. I think I have the right experience for that, and I still think those have been reinforced after being in that position for a couple of months. The other thing I would add is just an incredible opportunity to have an impact in specific areas. Hopefully most citizens, if they're not a lawyer, are never going to appear before a circuit judge because it's generally not good most times. But just seeing, and hear so much about the abuse and neglect cases, seeing the opportunity to be able to dismiss some of those cases and dismiss them because significant problems were addressed, corrected, and the families back together. That's been an incredible experience, and being able to participate in positive outcomes like that we don't see as often as we should or we would like to. But you can just have an incredible influence on people in a positive way in that position, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and that's why I want to continue now even more than I would have before I've been there for 2 years. I hope that's an adequate introduction.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me. I'm Tara Salango. I am a wife, a mother of 2 sons, 16 and 11. I've grown up in Kanawha County, lived here almost my entire life. I grew up in Nitro. I'm running for judge for several reasons, but the 2 reasons really that have always been foremost are, one, it's my passion. I'm very passionate about this position. And 2, it's a way to serve your community, and I take great pride in that. I've done several things to work in the community and serve the community, and being a circuit judge allows somebody to do that on a whole nother level, and I've always wanted to do that. As a lot of people know about me, my passion for this position started when I was in high school, actually. When I was a sophomore in school, my oldest brother, Todd, was murdered. And that really was the pivotal point in my life that put me on this career path. I sat through 2 trials because the first trial was, the conviction was reversed by the Supreme Court. And I can remember, especially during the second trial, I think during the first trial I was still, numb. It was within a year, I think, of the murder. But I can recall exactly the time of watching the second trial take place. Just having this feeling that is what I wanted to do with my life. I had such an immense appreciation and respect for the whole process, for the prosecutor, for the defense counsel, for the judge, for the courtroom staff. I just really took an interest and a liking to the entire process, and I knew I wanted to work in the criminal justice system. So I did. I graduated high school at Nitro High School in '95. I then went to West Virginia State. I worked, put myself through college and majored in criminal justice. And then I went to WVU for law school. I worked hard, worked my butt off. I graduated in the top 20% of my class. The competitive part of me took over in law school, and I wanted one of the top jobs that all of the students were after. So I accepted a position at Spillman Thomas and Battle, where I worked for 2 years. But I loved working there. I worked with wonderful people in a great firm, but I couldn't deny the passion that was within me to serve Kanawha County and to become a prosecutor. So I moved over to the prosecutor's office, where I worked as an assistant for 11 years. And, as an assistant prosecutor, you're in court almost every single day. And I enjoyed every minute of working with crime victims and their families, but I also really enjoyed trying to help the defendants when, in the appropriate cases. Not everybody who ends up in court is a bad person. Some people are in a tough spot in life. I enjoyed that aspect of that job, but I knew I wanted to become a judge, so I left that position to gain more civil experience, and I've been doing civil law for the past 2 years at Preston and Selenga.
Australia?
Thank you all for having me. Greg Elliott. Born in Charleston, raised in Charleston, grew up, still remain in Charleston. I graduated from Stonewall Jackson High School. I won't give you the year, but it's been a long time. Graduated from West Virginia State, got a law degree from Chicago Kent College of Law. Practiced with a senior attorney, Homer Hanna, for probably 10, 12 years. His health gave way. Been in private practice for 30 years by myself. I have, 40 years experience practicing law. Basically all aspects of the law, from criminal matters, general civil matters, personal injury cases, heavy caseload of family law issues, including hundreds and hundreds of divorce cases. I see in the court system that there are a lot of family-related cases that have been certain courts, whether it's appeals, domestic violence issues, abuse, neglect, etc. I have that type of background. The reason why I decided to run, I was asked by several different people to run on different occasions. And I thought there was going to be 6 or 7 people that were going to file and run. They came down to the very last day, and no one additionally had filed and run. So I went to the Secretary of State's office the very last day, like 4 or 5 o'clock, and went in and filed and run. I think that I have a lot to contribute if I was elected to the bench, especially, as I say, the extensive background that I have in family law matters, and still do that today. I mean, when you have the grandparents, and great have cases of great grandparents having custody of their great grandchildren because of the drug issues. I mean, that's what we're all going to talk about. We have a horrible problem, and no one has a solution to it. We can't be the solution. We can be part of the solution, but we can't be the solution. So, I mean, it's a community enterprise that has to put plans together. We have to reunite these families. We have to do something in order to get these kids away from the bad choices that they make, and their conscious choices that they make. Conscious choices. I've had people that I've known that have been clean for 2 or 3 years because they're being drug screened. 60 days after they're off their probation and no drug screens, they're back out on the street doing what they were doing before. So it's not a physical addiction. To me, it becomes a conscious choice, and why they choose to do that's beyond me. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with a question specific to Mr. Greer, and both candidates can follow up afterwards. You've been now circuit judge in this position following the resignation due to illness of James Stuckey. So this position fills the unexpired term of Judge Stuckey, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so you've been a judge now for 2 months. What have you learned? And let's say if one of these other two candidates get elected, what could you tell them based on your experience so far that you did not expect? What have you learned that you didn't expect to learn about being a judge?
I don't know that I would have been incredibly shocked by anything. I mean, I guess maybe the most surprising is I wasn't shocked. But I will say one thing. One reason I wasn't shocked is every judge that I talked to, and it was dozens, between the time the appointment was announced and I took the bench, was every judge I talked to said, you're going to be, it's going to be unbelievable how much of your docket the use neglect docket is. So because of that, I fully had that anticipation, and what they said was absolutely true. I mean, it is easily the most common thing on your docket, the most common thing you're going to hear. So I'm sure both Tara and Greg are also aware of that. So I don't know that would be shocking to them or something to be prepared for, but until you experience it, is a reality. You experience that, wow, how many of these cases there are out there. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is it's just reinforced how many decisions you make in a day. It's constant. It's decision. I said something about I like making decisions. I consider myself to be a fairly decisive person, and I enjoy that. I enjoy doing one thing and moving on to the next one. And I think you have to have that personality because whether it's a trial or whether it's a hearing, evidence is constantly coming in. You constantly have to be aware of what objections might come up. There's constantly rulings to be made. So it's just the constant need to make a decision and move on and keep the matters flowing. So I guess those are the two things that stand out for me.
Yeah, as a prosecutor, I saw over the years the growing trend in the abuse and neglect system. The opioid epidemic has touched everybody. I mean, it doesn't discriminate whether you're rich, poor, what have you. I think that, so many families are touched by it, and that's trickled into the court system. Just the number of kids who are taken away from homes these days, it's appalling and so disturbing. So, that definitely would not surprise me.
Not surprised at all, as I say, because of the work I do in family law. It's an everyday occurrence.
Okay. So let's keep talking about drugs then. Could you give us the status of drug court in Kanawha County and then what your position on it is, what you would pursue as a judge? Would you like to start?
Sure. I'm a huge proponent of drug court. I recently went to a drug court graduation a few months back, and I tell you, I was touched. In fact, I think I sat in the crowd and cried to the point where my husband, who was with me, said, "What's wrong with you, Tara?" But I was so touched by so many of these people and their stories. And a few of the graduates were names who I recall from being in the prosecutor's office, and they had been defendants years ago, and they had, been in and out of jail or in and out of rehab, but they finally, years later, got to the point in their life where they turned it around. And, they're reunited with their families, they're gainfully employed, they're productive members of society. So I think that drug courts definitely work. I think that we have one of the finest judges in Kanawha County who, is over our drug court, Judge Bailey. She does a phenomenal job. I told her months ago, I said, win or lose, I would be honored to work on the drug court with you. And I mean it. I believe in it that much.
Thank you.
I also think that the drug courts are an excellent tool, and I'll concur that Judge Bailey does an excellent job with heading that up. And she's done a tremendous job there. It is, I think Greg said this, I mean, that's one of the tools. I mean, there is no one tool that's going to solve this problem. Drug courts aren't going to solve the problem. They're not for everybody, but for people who come to understand that they need to change things and are willing to put in the work, it's a tremendous tool, and I think it can be very effective. Broadly speaking, this is very broadly speaking, but there's kind of two, in my short time, there's two sort of segments you can put. I'll talk about criminal defendants, and there's people who commit crime because of their drug problems, and those are very good candidates for a drug court, and we can help them get by that and solve these problems. And then there's career criminals who like to do drugs, and that's a very different issue. And those people, I don't think drug court's going to be appropriate or is going to help them, quite frankly. But for the people who are seeking the help and want the opportunity, I think it's an excellent tool, and we need to continue it and have that opportunity available for anybody that it can benefit.
Not much more than I can think. What else can you say? I mean, you have to get the people to the point where they want help. That's the whole thing. So many of these people need it, but they don't want it. We use the phrase, you have to hit rock bottom. I've seen them hit rock bottom. They still don't want it. We can put them on probation. We can drug screen. And sometimes they won't even pass the drug screens. That's what's really sad. They know it's coming, but they do it anyway. So there needs to be something expanded over and above. We need assistance from this psychological point of view. I mean, people need to be worked up. We need to figure out some way to get the people into the system so that the drug courts can assist them. And if you only have one person that comes out of the drug court, that's a success. I mean, that's one less person that's been saved on the street or ODs or does something to their family or to their children. So I think the drug courts are great, and keep moving forward.
And I'll just add, I mean, there is a very strict screening process for those individuals who get the opportunity for drug court. So I think that's good. I mean, you're not going to find a violent criminal who gets that opportunity. So these are the people who use drugs and commit petty crimes.
So how's the court doing on resources for drug court?
I think there's always room for more. With the growing trend, growing numbers, I think there's always room for more resources.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts?
I mean, I agree. I mean, there's always the need for more resources.
Okay. I can keep going unless you guys want to.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll have some later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So how about truancy court? Where do we stand on that? Do we do that in North Carolina?
We do.
And how's that going?
We do.
If you like.
I think with there's just a direct correlation between the drugs and truancy. When I was a prosecutor, I handled a lot of truancy cases. And these are kids who are, in broken homes most of the time. They're, being raised by, either a grandparent or an aunt or uncle. They, a lot of times don't have that strict oversight. They don't have a support system. It was a problem, when I worked in the system, and I think it will continue to be a problem until we get our hands around this drug problem.
And I agree, there's a huge correlation between the abuse and neglect proceedings, and just so many of the kids in there are also truant or incorrigible or whatever. I mean, unfortunately, there's so many cases where you're dealing with them from a couple of different aspects. And I agree, you cannot separate the two, although they're separate. I mean, we have the drug issue and then we have the family issue. I mean, just the number that everybody's reported on and talked about, but just the huge number of these abuse and neglect filings this year. And a lot of them are drugs, not all of them are drugs. I mean, it's two problems that are very much related, but they're not exclusive to each other. And like I said, seeing some of those abuse and neglect proceedings when you can actually address a problem. But, often it's substance abuse, sometimes it's mental health issue, there's other things, but when you can address those problems and put that family back together and knowing that that problem is corrected, that's how we're going to give these kids a chance. Now, it doesn't guarantee anything, and like I said, it doesn't happen as often as you want it to, but that is a good feeling as I've had in this job, is when you can see significant issues actually be addressed successfully, and you put those families back together, and then you're going to give those kids a chance to learn and understand and maybe break that cycle. So all the drug, family, truancy, all those are interrelated, but they're all little separate issues.
Once again, I agree with all of that. In addition, I think that these days we have a value issue that's going on. We don't, from grade school when children are young, it's almost as if we no longer teach values in school. And if we do, those values are not reinforced at home. I mean, just these extreme examples that someone shoots someone because they said something wrong to them. That person has no valuable life.
Okay.
We have families that are raising children that way.
Okay, so what does a circuit judge do about that?
Well, circuit judge can't do much at all about that in terms of instilling values. But what a circuit judge can do is what's already been explained, for example, about Dan. Get these kids into the system, and they come in through the truancy and abuse and neglect issues. But those kids need some help over and above just what the court itself can do.
Can I pick up on something you said, if you don't mind? You said, what can a circuit judge do? And that's kind of the dilemma. When the family unit fails, I mean, it's all a question of second best after that. Because, I mean, if it's not functioning as it should, a circuit judge isn't going to be able to come in and take care of what a family should do if a family's totally dysfunctional. But I mean, we have to do our best to equip that family to deal with it. And when it's not there, whether it's foster care, whether it's placements or whatever, we got to do what we can to try to emphasize to those kids, there's consequences to your actions. I mean, that seems to be the common thread, and whether it's truancy or whatever, is kids are coming up not understanding that there's consequences to actions. And I think that's something we can help do through helping the family structure, but also in the decisions we make. We just need to reinforce and hopefully teach them when they're young enough to change that there's consequences to actions, and you have to think about that when you're making your decisions of what your conduct's going to be.
Well, is truancy court all about consequences, or are there services that go along?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's absolutely services to the kids, to the families, and to correct those issues. But I think part of that, if we're not teaching them that there's consequences to actions, we're doing a disservice. But absolutely, there are services that need to and are provided.
And I think that's what it takes, is a judge who's in tune with that. I mean, it's easy. I've seen it. It's easy to hand down a sentence to somebody, or a kid who's in court for being incorrigible or truant. It's easy to say, okay, I'm going to place you on an improvement period or probation, what have you, some alternative sentence. Stay on the right track, and I'll see you in 3 months. But it takes a judge who's going to be in tune with that to know a program, to know what kind of program is going to work for these kids or these defendants. So, I think you really got to, it's not just handing down a sentence or, putting them on an improvement period. I think you really have to follow that kid, and you can make a difference. I've seen it happen. These kids can be turned around.
Well, a little bit about services. I'm sorry, you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead, if you're following.
The last 2 meetings here, the last 2 days here at Gazette Mail, we've had Supreme Court candidates. And a lot of the answers, and being the conservative writer, I certainly agree with it, is that we don't make the law, we just interpret the law. However, as a circuit judge, and you're dealing with people who are breaking the law and the consequences, and which your role is to interpret the law and apply the law. But what is the role when you see things where the law needs to be changed? What would be the role of a circuit judge to talk to the legislature? Is there a role to talk to the legislators and say, here's a law that needs to be changed, and here's my recommendations from my experience? Is there a role for a circuit judge in that?
I mean, I think so. I think you have to be very respectful of the separation of powers and all this, but absolutely. I mean, I think it would be our duty when we see a problem with a particular law or a policy that's having an adverse effect. I mean, I think we absolutely need to be vocal about sharing with our legislators what we're seeing, and I think the Judicial Association does that to some extent, and I think that's something that we should encourage and do more of, quite frankly. And you're exactly right that I view strongly that it's not my job if the legislature says this is the policy. I may disagree with it, but it's my job to apply that policy. But in the same token, there's nothing that stops me, and I think I should go to the legislature and say, hey, this is the policy you all created, and we're applying it, but this is the problem with that. So I absolutely think that should be done, but not getting away from the duty of the judge to apply the law, not create it. I'll tell you what, just as an example, there was a case where a lawyer was arguing a certain outcome to me that, quite frankly, I kind of tended to agree with it. There was a Supreme Court case from our state, exactly the opposite. I didn't like that Supreme Court case, but it's the Supreme Court case. I'm not the Supreme Court, I'm the circuit judge. So you know what? I wrote my opinion, I wrote my order about how terrible and how awful, and I disagreed with that Supreme Court opinion, but guess what? That's the law, so that's what I'm doing. Now, that might get appealed. That'll be fine. If they reverse me on that, I'll clap my hands and I'll be happy. But that is my job, I think. My job is to follow the law, but that absolutely does not prohibit me from having input on how those with the authority to change the law could change the law.
I mean, what more can you say? I mean, we sit there and we apply the law. We don't write the law. We don't interpret the law. Here's what it is. You have to be fair. You have to be impartial. And you have to apply whatever it is that's in front of you.
I agree. I mean, clearly the job of a judge is to apply the law. But I do think in that position, you're in a unique position too. If you want to relay your views to the legislature, I don't see a problem with
And I want to preface this by saying that I've asked this of judicial candidates for years, but it
ask is just give me a level playing field. See, as a sitting court judge, you want those attorneys that are coming from the outside of Kanawha County to know that if they're practicing before you, it's going to be a level playing. They're going to be treated just exactly the same as your best buddy that happens to be appearing before you.
So how about FOIA? If a request for public documents lands on your desk, I think there's something in the statute that says you're to treat this, to expedite this as a circuit judge. Do you handle these in a timely manner? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I may be wrong, but I bet I've had more FOIA. I don't know if you have to deal with that. I've had
2 months?
no, not in 2 months. I haven't. But in my prior 2 jobs, I dealt with FOIA a lot. And let me move on. So yes, I think that is something that should take priority. It should be handled quickly. Now, there's a lot, saying that said, there's a lot of things under statute that are supposed to take priority.
Right.
And when you have, when you have 75 things that are all supposed to be priority, if you're number 75, it's going to feel like I'm not getting priority, but you probably are. Now, if it's some kind of abuse and neglect thing, that might bump FOIA in my mind.
Sure.
But absolutely, those things are put in there for a reason, and I would absolutely think they deserve to move to the front of the list.
Absolutely, that's what the statute requires, definitely.
Okay.
We all agree. I mean, you apply the statute, that's the way it reads, that's the way you handle it.
The judiciary in West Virginia has been taking a hit here with what's going on in the Supreme Court. Obviously, there's probably been more written about the Supreme Court in West Virginia in the last year and a half or so than there had been in probably 20 plus, or not the whole existence of West Virginia. Just the credibility hit that has happened to the Supreme Court, do you believe that's affecting all the judiciary? And if so, how does the judiciary at the circuit court level address it and build back up credibility?
I don't think it does affect the circuit court. You don't read anything in the newspaper, or you don't hear anything on the news about this trickle-down effect of the circuit court. I mean, the circuit court is the court of the people. You have 10, 15, 20 cases a day, just depending on what kind of cases, and you might have, between 1 and 10 people involved in each case. I mean, it's like it's the people's court. People look at the Supreme Court and they're like, I mean, we're all sitting here with the same thing, like, what in the crap is going on? And why? That's the problem. Why? Why did all that stuff happen? I don't think it has a trickle-down effect.
We've been agreeing a lot. I want to disagree a little bit because, in the interactions I've had with citizens, I think there is a little bit of trickle-down effect. When I talk to people and I'm introducing myself, telling them, it's almost they immediately run to, okay, what's your connection with all that stuff going on? And it's like, none, none. You try to emphasize that that's something different. But I think there is some amount of trickle-down effect. I think when you tell people out there you're a judge, that's immediately where their mind goes. I think they lump that all in together. I really do. Now, there's certainly a lot of people that understand the difference and distinction, but when we're talking general public, I think there's some trickle down. How do you address that? I think it goes back to, relates to this discussion about judicial temperament. I think as circuit judges, we just need to do our jobs and do them well. I mean, when we have that atmosphere in our courtrooms that we're professional, we're courteous, we have our hearings on time, we actually make decisions instead of making people wait forever. We're fair. When people have that perception, when we abide by, when we recuse ourselves, when we should recuse ourselves, when we do our jobs right, that's what's going to take care of this problem. It's not a magic button you can push to fix it in the next 2 weeks, but do your job and do it well over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and that's going to be the process that's needed to restore confidence.
I agree. I've knocked on so many doors in Kanawha County, and I've had the same response as Dan. You know, people, when I say, you know, what I'm running for, oh, wait a minute, are you involved in, not Supreme Court, right? And, you know, the general public, a lot of them, they don't understand the difference in the different offices, but, so I do, but I think it has trickled down. I think just the judiciary as a whole, you know, people are a little bit skeptical of judges, and, you know, it's unfortunate. I think you address it by, you know, having an open courtroom, you know, just being transparent. And it's the people's court. I mean, that's there for the public, so.
Pick up on something that Dave said. One of the problems that I see is that you have a case and you have your clients there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you don't have a judge that shows up until 10 o'clock. And it happens every once in a while. I mean, there are some counties in which, you know, that happens with regularity. And it's those clients that then have a bad taste in their mouth about the court system. But also it leaves the lawyers in the same boat. You know, we schedule a half an hour hearing and we're an hour late before we ever get to the hearing. So we've got another hearing that was supposed to start 15 minutes ago. It's bad scheduling. I mean, I think that if you're the sitting circuit court judge, your staff needs to know that if a lawyer calls and says, I need a half-hour hearing, that lawyer knows he's only going to get a half-hour hearing. He's not going to stretch an hour or 2 hours so that everyone else is then infuriated outside. That's something that, you know, for the most part, I mean, you know, most of the judges run pretty thorough, pretty well-scheduled docket, but there are occasions and some judges don't. And I'm not pinpointing Kanawha County, of course.
Keep going. So when the Supreme Court candidates were in here, we're asking them things like, when are you going to get this electronic filing, and what's the public access going to be? So as circuit judges, what can you do to move electronic filing up to the Supreme Court? You have a role in that?
I mean, I think mainly we can complain. I mean, quite frankly,
Us too.
I mean, you know, we obviously can't
Right.
make anybody up there do anything. But I think certainly we have channels of communication, and I think we can encourage and badger and harass and all those kinds of things. I agree, all that stuff needs done. It needs to happen now, but I think that's what we have the authority to do, complain.
Any other thoughts on electronic filing?
I mean, you know, obviously if it helps run an efficient docket, and that's what a judge needs, is to run an efficient docket, so make the voice heard.
Okay, so you all see there's a lot of domestic violence, right? We touched on that. Statute says when there's a petition against someone for domestic violence, they are not to have access to their guns. Yet, we have a lot of cases where somebody gets killed when they are not even supposed to have access to their guns. So what can a circuit judge do about that?
It goes, you know, that goes back to what I said earlier about a judge has to be really in tune with his or her order and the steps it takes to carry out that order. You know, it's sometimes judges don't put it in the order to confiscate the firearms, or if it is in the order, then there's, you know, it falls through the cracks somewhere, whether it's that order doesn't reach the police. There's not any specifics in the order as how the police agency goes about confiscating the guns, you know, which guns. Once the police get them, what do they do with them? So the judge has to be really in touch with and fine tune his or her order and make sure that order is carried out.
Well, you know,
Go ahead.
majority of the DVPs take place and heard by family court judges. You know, it's the family court judges that's the first line of defense against that. You know, when we're representing someone, either party in regard to a domestic violence petition, The court actually has forms, the family court has forms. Parties are required to fill out with respect to number of firearms, types of firearms, locations of firearms. Those firearms are then confiscated, or they have to be turned over to other parties. And I think that's one of the problems you run into when you have families in possession of son's firearms because he's been found guilty of domestic violence. That's a big problem. And the overall big problem there is the police, I don't think the police has enough storage room to take care of all of these firearms that are required to be given up in the domestic violence programs. My goodness, there's individuals, people have cases of firearms in West Virginia. cases of them.
I know in a lot of states, the police agencies will contract with, storage facilities, or they'll find a place to put them. But it's, it's all about making sure that it doesn't fall through the cracks and let the police agency know which firearms they take and how they go about getting those firearms.
Yeah, I agree with some of the other things we're saying. I think primarily this is a magistrate question, not a circuit court question, because Greg's right. These are family court, and the way they get to us, if they do, is when somebody appeals the decision on those, and then they'll come up to us. But he's correct. These formal orders always have that language in there that I've seen in my experience, and we down below they need to make sure they're following up on that. But the other thing that I would say, in addition, I agree with all that's been said, but in addition to that, I would say, going back to something I said earlier about consequences, not particularly just in this area, but with whether it's probation, whether it's home confinement, whether it's other things. One thing I'm seeing constantly is there seems to be, not just in this area, but there's a lot of times when people seem to think that complying with the terms of these things is optional. And when we do find the violation, hopefully we find that the individual has the gun before they use it to shoot somebody, right? But when that occurs, there needs to be consequences for that. That's part of the equation too. I wholeheartedly agree. You have to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks. And if we know about guns, let's go get them. But there are going to be times when people just decide they're not going to obey the law. And when that happens, there needs to be swift and significant consequences so that individual and other individuals will realize when this order says I'm not to have a firearm, I ought not have a firearm. So I think that's the other part of this is when we do find these violations, I'm not opposed to second chances. I'm not so crazy about third and fourth chances, particularly in situations like this. So I think when we find that those things are being violated, there needs to be repercussions.
So what would be an appropriate consequence in a scenario like you just?
Well, it's hard to say in any particular case, but obviously you're violating a court order, right? So there's contempt, there's whether there's underlying criminal charges, if there's other things going on. A judge has all kinds of options and tools in his toolbox, but whether that's a contempt finding, whether there's some criminal charges pending, whether there can be a revocation of bonds or probation or home confinement or whatever the specific situations are going on, and each one it's going to be a little different. But there's going to be, regardless, there's going to be tools a judge can use to send a signal to this person that this is not going to be tolerated.
Okay. You want to follow up on that one?
Well, just a little. The problem that we have is some of these individuals out there, and you see they're repeat offenders that come through the family court system. I can go down there on a Monday for a divorce hearing and see a set of people, and throughout the week they're back on DVDs. It's not that the family court system is overly lenient, let me say that, but they're just people that have no value. They value nothing. So when a guy beats his girlfriend and beats her again and again and again, doesn't mean anything to him. I agree with Dan. I mean, some of these people, you have to get their attention and you have to get it in a drastic measure. Does that mean you're off to jail for whatever the statute allows, so that sends a message? That person then becomes an example and hopefully a deterrent. And it's bad. I mean, it's like a war zone down there at times.
That's all our questions. Each you take a minute to finalize why you're the best choice. I see 3 good people here and there's 1 seat. So just please, we'll start with you, Mr. Elliott. Just start why you're
Well,
great choices.
Sure. I just think that I've got 40 years of experience in a wide variety of areas of the law. You know, originally it was heavy on criminal practice, and then civil practice, and then personal injury practice. And then here in the latter part of my practice, it's a heavy emphasis on family law issues, divorce, domestic violence, the grandparent issues, grandparent parenting time, grandparent custody issues. And all these things flow up to the circuit court. And as Dan said, my goodness, majority of his docket at times are crowded with these family issues. Because of that background, I think I'm the best qualified individual for the position.
Yeah, I would say that 75% of a circuit court judge's docket deals with abuse and neglect or criminal matters. And like I said, as an assistant prosecutor for over 11 years, I dealt with those matters day in and day out. I mean, that's what you do. You're right in the thick of it. You know, and I take great pride in that. You know, I think I look at this position as a privilege. It would be an honor and a privilege to serve the people of Kanawha County, and you know, to just be fair and diligent. I'm a hard worker. I'm empathetic. If I don't understand an issue, I make sure I understand the issue at the end of the day. And you know, that's what I would bring to the court. What you see is what you get. So I would be honored to be the next circuit judge.
You know, going back to where I started, I think I have a unique set of experiences in different places that I've been privileged to work, and things I've seen and dealt with different people that gives me a unique opportunity to do this job quickly and hit the ground running. And I think that's what I've done. I have one advantage over both of my worthy opponents, and I'm not going to say you can't throw away those whole 2 months of experience. That's not what I'm saying. But what I can say, and it's not through fault of their own, but anybody can say what they're going to do as a judge. I can say what I've done in terms of an example. These things we've talked about today, how a judge ought to work hard. I'm not telling you I'm doing that. I'm doing that. I mean, I'm there at 8 o'clock every morning. I'm there. My hearings are on time. You talk to the attorneys in this town, I think the word's already out there. When I tell you I'm starting a hearing at 9, I want to start the hearing at 9. If it's supposed to last a half hour, we're going to last a half hour. I'm making decisions. I'm giving judges decisions. I think if you talk to lawyers, even that may not agree with my decisions, I think they will tell you that I have treated them fairly and heard their point of view. So I would encourage people to see what I'm doing, because I think a lot of these things that we've talked about, I'm doing. So I think my experience, my background has allowed me, equipped me for this, and I think I've demonstrated that in the short time I've been on the bench.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.